So today is about connections and relationships, and I just want to share some personal things about me so that you know who is here talking to you today. So I was born and raised and still live in South Louisiana. And this top photo is my mom's family getting together for my grandma's 75th. So we are spread across many states, but we've gotten together at least once a year for most of my life. My partner, Devin, and I, we live in Gonzales, Louisiana. I'm a bonus mom to his two daughters. We have a ton of fun together. And Devin and I are fitness enthusiasts. We did my first competition, his third, together in 2021. That is what that photo is from. I don't look like that anymore, but it was a really fun experience. He is currently in prep for his fifth competition. I've transitioned to a more holistic wellness approach in my own life. I love my creative outlet is not only what I do with speaking and teaching, but also photography. I love nature, and I took this little bee picture of my backyard because sometimes someone talked about solitude. Sometimes we need solitude and just peace and connecting with ourselves and connecting with nature. And I love to do that through photography. But I love to spend the most of my time with people. And this is my first year in the junior league, which is all those beautiful ladies in red, so that I could meet more growth minded and community minded women right here locally in my community. And it has been a great experience. So I'm excited to be here to talk to you about DISC today, using DISC for connections, because it is something that really changed my life. And I cannot give it enough credit, not just DISC, but other personality assessments. I had a lot of opportunities in my life to be exposed to personality assessments for self-awareness, which I know you had a session on previously. But it wasn't until I got into a leadership position that I was introduced in using personality assessments to learn about everybody else and how to use that to communicate and connect with others. A quote that I love by a psychologist that I love is that the quality of your life ultimately depends on the quality of your relationships. And I think a lot of us have talked about that today. The relationships that we have in our lives really have a profound impact on our overall well-being and life fulfillment. So leveraging tools like the DISC really allow us to enhance the quality of our relationships intentionally by understanding the behavioral styles and having these insights into being able to tweak communication preferences, understanding their decision-making processes and our own, and how those might be different, as well as interaction styles. So by recognizing and appreciating these differences, we can cultivate empathy, understanding, and respect in all of our relationships, whether professionally or personally. And so adapting to these different communication styles can become key in fostering deeper connections and really helping others to feel understood just by acknowledging that you recognize what their preference is and altering your style to communicate with them in that way. I'm gonna go. So I want to start with some do's and don'ts for the information that we're going to receive here today. What we do want to do with it is learn some of the ways that we can be different from everybody around us. Know that no type is better than any other type, though a lot of people like to joke that, oh, my type is the best. It's a funny thing that my boyfriend and I get into together with each other sometimes. Just a joke we have. Understanding that nobody's way is right or wrong, and using this information to facilitate conversations with the people around you to understand how they like to be communicated with, and also to let them know your preferences. What we don't want to do is take what we learn and just label or type people. We don't want to use our type, once we understand what our preferences are, as an excuse to control or change other people. We can't force our communication preference on anybody else. We can only educate them and let them know what we would prefer and give them the opportunity to respond in kind. And we don't want to use our style as an excuse for this is just the way that I am. Some people can do that with personality assessments. Oh, great. This reads me like a book. I'm just going to give it to everybody I know so that they know what to expect and I don't have to do anything differently. We definitely don't want to do that. What we learn about ourselves, we'll learn strengths. We'll also learn areas for improvement. So we all have the ability to learn and evolve and change our preferences. And that was my experience as a leader. Once I learned some of the preferences of other people, even though it was outside of my comfort zone to put myself out there in the ways that they preferred, it was my best opportunity to have harmonious work relationships and to motivate those team members. So I started it very much as a necessary evil and fell in love with it. A little bit of history. So there are a lot of personality assessments out there. The DISC is a very old, very well researched assessment. It was developed in 1920 by Dr. William Marston. And fun trivia fact, if anybody care, we talked about DC Comics earlier. Dr. Marston is the creator of the Wonder Woman. So another reason that I'm a fan of his. He developed the DISC theory while doing research for his book, The Emotions of Normal People, which I think is a fabulous title. I've never read this book, but I think that we could all really educate ourselves around what emotions are normal for people because we as a society like to keep it very even keel. And as humans, we experience a very wide range of experiences and emotions. So when his research was complete, the DISC theory was formed into a validated and reliable assessment for personal and professional development. So research has shown that behavioral characteristics can be grouped together in 4 major groups. The acronym for DISC is these 4 different styles. So D is for dominant or driver. I is influencing or inspiring. S is steady or stable. And C is compliant or correct. And these are very descriptive words for the personality styles. And when we talk about them, sometimes we're talking about the more extreme side of the road. So someone could have a very high D and dominant, but then also have a very high S. And that is going to differentiate them a lot in the way that they show up from someone who is, say, a high D with a high C. So we're going to talk more about the characteristics that show up in each of these. But I love this graphic because it shows you visually that our D and C people are task oriented compared to our I and S people who are people oriented. And then flip that, the D and I people are outgoing. They're going to be much more bold and in your face, as to where your C and S people are going to be much more reserved and quiet. They're going to be the one in the room sitting back and listening and waiting, gauging the temperature before they speak up or not speaking up at all, as to where your D and I people might be the first ones to talk and have the strongest opinions. So do not feel like, again, you need to memorize this chart. But in the course of daily life, you can observe the behavioral styles in action because you're probably interacting with each of these styles to varying degrees every day. So I have a few questions that could pose as illustrative examples. So as you think about your family members, friends, and coworkers, do you know someone who is assertive, to the point, and wants the bottom line? People that are forceful, direct, and strong-willed. And I'm sorry, I can't see the chat if anybody is answering, but those are going to be your D style people. And then I see it definitely. I think we all do. So do you have any friends who are great communicators and friendly to everyone they meet? Someone optimistic, friendly, very talkative. This is going to be your I style. So do you have any family members who are good listeners and great team players? They're steady, patient, loyal, and practical. These are your S people. And your S people are your people. They are your loyal, true, to the end friends. Have you ever worked with someone who enjoys gathering facts and details and is thorough in all activities? Some people are precise, sensitive, and analytical. This is the C style, and you find a lot of C's in accounting. So as you can see, we do have a summary here of the types that can help you as you're going through daily interactions to understand who you might be speaking with and what they might like or not like. So this chart is to help you understand some of their behavior, and I'm going to get into some tips on how to communicate with each style. But if you have a dominant person that you're working with, they're looking to control the situation. They're strong leaders, but sometimes they have trouble listening to their employees for feedback, and that's an area of growth for them. They don't like people who take too long to make decisions, so they might struggle working with a compliant person or a steady personality. Your high eyes, they're seeking recognition. They want to be seen. They want to be cheered on. They're going to be your biggest cheerleader, and they want to be cheered on. Their strengths are being enthusiastic and entertaining, but sometimes they're lacking follow through. They might be that friend who's always ready to make spontaneous plans, but if you planned something, they had something spontaneous come up last minute and they forgot about the plan that you made. They don't like routines and they're going to make very spur of the moment decisions. Your steady person is seeking acceptance. They're people oriented and they want to be a part of the group. So they're great at teamwork and listening, but they can be really sensitive to any form of criticism if that could possibly threaten their acceptance. They really dislike impatient people. So they might struggle if they're in a power dynamic with a high D. And they like to confer with others when they make decisions. So this is definitely going to be someone where if they're starting to make a decision, it's like, well, let me check with my partner, let me check with my friends, let me check with my team, let me make sure that everybody is on board with this decision before I move forward because I don't want to step on anyone's toes. And then we have our compliance. Like I said, we see a lot of these in CPAs. They want accuracy. They love systems and planning, but they can fall into perfectionism and being critical of others who don't take the same high standards that they take in their lives in every aspect. So they can be critical of others falling short. They are just as critical of themselves when they fall short of their image of perfection. They don't like disorganization, and their decisions are going to be very methodical and thought through. They might have a spreadsheet, but they're going to have all the data and they're going to have considered everything before they move forward. So I did give a few examples of areas of potential conflict between styles, but I just have a couple more here. And of course, there's so many potential areas of conflict because we're different. And if we don't understand those differences, we're going to start to feel like this person is just really difficult to deal with. I don't want to deal with them. I don't understand why they can't just get on board. Why can't they just see it the way I do? Why can't they just make that decision? Right. And so sometimes if we can understand all the different ways that people approach these things, then we can have understanding and empathy for them in that. So understanding that if you have a C and a D working together, that C is going to provide attention to detail that the D lacks. But in doing so, they have to remember that when they present that data, they need to keep it brief and focus on the end result rather than the process and all the details that they used to come to that conclusion. So I wanted to provide some practical tips for communicating with each style. We gave some examples earlier of maybe how to identify who's around you and what their style is. And here are some tips on how to communicate with, say, that high D in your life, right? We talked about they don't like details. Be direct and brief. They are task oriented. If you walk into a high D's office and you interrupt what they're doing and you start to tell them about your weekend, they are going to be impatient. That is not the time They don't have time for that right now. So you want to be direct and to the point when you're in task-oriented situations, and then you can have specifically get to know you situations to share personal items with them. And same with the C. With your DNCs, they are task-oriented, and in the work setting, they are really just trying to get things done. If you interrupt them, you're likely not going to be received well. And our I and S people sometimes take this to be, this person doesn't care about me. They're so cold. They're so distant. They don't like me, or even that they're angry at me. I had an employee who was a high S. I was a high C in my accounting days before I learned how to people. That's how I say it. I had to learn how to people. And she wanted me, if I started an interaction with her, she wanted me to ask her how her weekend was or how her day was going, or starting the conversation personal in some way. And as a high C who didn't yet understand that other people appreciate different approaches, I did not understand. I would just walk up to her desk, hey, this is what I need from you today, or this is what an issue that I found, or and I would just walk up to her and immediately start going into work mode and task mode. And she would put up her guard and not be receptive. And so I learned through this, walking up 60 seconds, maybe even 2 minutes of personal conversation before I asked about that work task would get me an entirely different employee for the rest of the day, because I, as a high C, it wasn't that I disliked her. That thought just didn't occur to me. So learning that really helped me to transform that relationship with her. So when you're going and talking to an S, you want to, express your appreciation for their dedication and loyalty, and also for them as a person, recognizing them as a person. Same with the I, recognizing them as a person and having that personal connection before you dive into asking them about a task or giving them any sort of feedback. So, like I mentioned, you can have your high style, but with that, some people might just have, one characteristic that plots really high, and they are a high D or a high I. But a lot of people have a secondary or even a third style that is still very high for them. And depending on how these things chart for you, you could be one of any of these types. So it does get very intricate and very personal when you take the assessment. You can get a lot more insight than the simple four dominant styles that we covered today, and it can be very nuanced. So, like it says, it takes all kinds to run the world, to run the team, to just make up the communities that we live in. And so understand turning these differences, you can turn these differences into a strong team or strong relationships through understanding and humility. And sometimes we have to understand, like we have to take that humility and understand that we're not always right, understand that we have things to learn, and that we could adjust some of our strong preferences if we understand the way that that is falling on people and the impact that it is having on them. So when I go and I work with teams, I have everyone take the assessment, and then we meet as a team to see the full picture, strengths and weaknesses of the whole. Because if a leader is only hiring people who think and act like themselves, they're going to compound their own weaknesses and blind spots. So recognizing every type has their strengths and every type has their weaknesses, and that we really do need all types. So I have, I think, just over 8 minutes for questions, and I would love to open up a discussion. Anyone who would like to talk about any questions or key takeaways. I've seen some action going in the chat, but I haven't been able to keep up with it all. Sorry.
Jen, I'll share. I appreciate you sharing this insight because we all know about the importance of diversity, but oftentimes the diversity, even when it comes to personalities, can be a major source of conflict. And sharing the importance of understanding the different styles and being mindful of how to interact with people of differences definitely makes a difference. I agree. I think Dawn said it in the chat. It's just like for me, I believe I'm an IS, surprise, surprise. But you can get so much further with a good morning or a hi, and I include that in there as well, as opposed to just starting off a conversation early in the morning, like, what's the status of this, or did you do this? It's like, irks. Good morning to you too. And, how can we move on from there? So it is important to do that. Oftentimes, if organizations are not intentional about setting up these assessments and facilitating, what resources do you recommend that are economical or even free to do this as a team building activity for teams that are working together?
Mhm. So the DISC assessment itself is not very expensive. And I do tell people you can just have, I will sell just the report, just the assessment, and you don't have to bring me in. It doesn't have to be a full day workshop or anything like that. It's whatever level people are comfortable with. I'm not aware of any free DISC reports. I do know there are a lot of different types of personality assessments online. One that I used before I used DISC is the Myers-Briggs 16 personalities, and that one 16personalities.com, and that one is free and it is a great resource. It's not quite as in-depth because it's free, but it is definitely useful. It gets you talking about those differences. Oh, you are muted.
I have a question. Oh
Sure.
wait, no, well, I see someone's hand raised first. I couldn't find where to raise mine. Allison, you can go ahead.
Oh no, please go right ahead. I can speak after you. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm Lauren. I see my picture on the screen, but anyway, what do you think is I'm not going to say the danger in certain assessments, but sometimes when people take assessments, people kind of box you in based on that. Now, I've taken quite a few, 16 personalities included. And for DISC, I'm a CD, but my shading is an I for enthusiasm specifically. So I think it's not really common, I guess, of the dominant personality. So how do you kind of go about letting people know that this is an assessment, and yes, it can describe me, but you shouldn't just, this is how I'm going to deal with you from here on out.
Right. Yeah. If you remember when I started, we had that do and don't slide. And that is exactly what I'm talking about is we don't want to use it to type others and put them in a box. And we certainly don't want to use it to put ourselves in a box. It is a tool, but it's also, we as humans, we are capable of change and development. And this is a point in time in our development and in our comfort level. But if we really are investing in our personal growth and we really want to develop, those strengths and move out of some of those tendencies, we can. And so it is, don't limit yourself and don't limit others. Just use it as a tool for approaching communication right now.
Noted. Thank you. Because I know some people are just like, oh, this is you. This is you. I've seen it through. And I'm like, I was 23. All right.
Yes, yes, yes. We evolve and we change. And if you had met me 6 years ago, I was afraid to stand up in front of a company meeting just to tell them this is when your timesheets are due. And I wore only very dark clothes, and I was very introverted and very insecure and very high C, and I did not know how to deal with people. We can break out of our box. So
Thank you.
definitely it's a good awareness to, if they bring awareness to that and say, okay, this is an area, if they say you can come across as a little direct and like you're not listening to others, you can say, okay, thanks for that feedback. I will try to develop my listening skills. But that doesn't mean that you are not capable of listening.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I just wanted to clear the air about that.
Yeah, thank you. Allison?
Hi, yes, Lauren, I think you read my mind. That was exactly what I was going to question or speak with Jen about. Jen, would you agree that at any given time, even currently, you can be any of those assessments, any of those styles, depending on the project, the time, the audience, the group. So sometimes it's very situational.
Mhm.
And yes, I took the disc years ago.
Mhm.
My assessment, I just took it again a few months ago, and my assessment was somewhat different than it was when I took it, years ago.
Mhm. Yes. So we have at any given time, we have kind of a comfort style, like where we're going to go in stress, what we're going to default to. We have that style. We also have our environmental style, and that is what we perceive to be expected of us based on the environments that we are putting ourselves into. So if you're in a role, you could be a high C, but if you are in a role that is requiring you to be out speaking in front of others and being more forthcoming, you push yourself to show up in that space. So we all adapt, but that doesn't mean you might be showing up that way in one space because it's required of you to be successful in that position, but your comfort level is predominantly in another style. And so actually the report that I have through the Maxwell DISC program shows you both styles.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.